Hello and welcome back to the English Learning Podcast, the place where we help you become a more confident English speaker, one conversation at a time. I'm Henry, your host, and joining me today, as always, is my fantastic co-host, Sarah. Hi, Sarah.
Hey, Henry, and hello to all our listeners. We're so excited to have you here for another episode. Today, we're diving into a super important topic: how to train your brain to think in English.
That's right. If you've ever caught yourself translating every word in your head before speaking, or if you feel like your brain just refuses to switch to English mode, don't worry, you're not alone.
Exactly. Thinking in English is a game changer for fluency, and today we'll share some practical tips and strategies to help you stop relying on translation and start thinking naturally in English.
By the end of this episode, you'll have some great techniques to practice every day. So if you're ready to boost your fluency and start thinking like an English speaker, let's jump right in. So, Sarah, let's start with the big question. Why is it so important for English learners to think in English instead of translating from their native language?
Great question, Henry. The biggest reason is fluency. When you translate in your head, it slows you down. Instead of speaking naturally, your brain is doing extra work, thinking in your native language, translating it, then speaking in English. That delay makes conversations feel awkward, right?
Exactly. And I've seen this happen a lot. Learners get stuck because their brains are searching for the perfect translation. But English and other languages don't always match word for word. So translation can actually lead to more confusion.
Totally. I remember one of my students, Pedro, who speaks Spanish. He kept translating Spanish phrases directly into English, but sometimes the meaning got lost. For example, he once said, "I have 30 years?" instead of "I am 30 years old," because that's how it's said in Spanish.
Oh yeah, I've heard that before. That's a perfect example of why translating doesn't always work. Different languages have different structures, and trying to force a direct translation can lead to funny or even confusing mistakes.
Right. And another reason to think in English is confidence. When you stop translating, you start trusting your instincts. You don't overanalyze every word, you just speak. And that makes you sound more natural.
That's such a good point. When you hear native speakers talking, do you think they're carefully planning every sentence in their heads? No way. They just talk. And that's the goal for English learners, to train their brains to respond naturally in English, without hesitation.
Exactly. And don't worry, it doesn't happen overnight. But with practice, you'll notice that your brain starts picking up English words and phrases without needing to translate. And that's when your fluency takes off.
So true. All right, now that we know why thinking in English is so important, let's talk about something every learner experiences. Why is it so hard to do? What are the biggest challenges people face when trying to think in English? So, Sarah, we know that thinking in English is super important for fluency, but let's be real, it's not easy. Why do so many learners struggle with this?
Great question. I think the biggest challenge is habit. Most people have spent their whole lives thinking in their native language, so switching to English feels unnatural at first.
That makes sense. It's like muscle memory. Your brain automatically goes back to what it's used to.
Exactly. And because of this habit, many learners don't even realize they're translating in their heads. They think, "How do I say this in English?" instead of just letting the words come naturally.
Right. And another big challenge is fear of making mistakes. A lot of learners hesitate because they're afraid of saying something wrong. Have you noticed that?
Oh, all the time. I had a student, Mia, who was really good at English, but she always doubted herself. Before she spoke, she'd pause for a long time, trying to find the perfect words. She was so afraid of making mistakes that it actually slowed her down.
That's such a common struggle. But here's the thing. Mistakes are part of learning. If you wait until your sentence is perfect, you'll never speak fluently. Native speakers make mistakes too, and that's okay.
Exactly. And here's another challenge: lack of vocabulary. Sometimes learners struggle to think in English because they don't know enough words. If you can't express an idea, your brain automatically switches back to your native language.
That's true. And even when learners do know the words, they often don't practice using them in daily thinking. So when they try to speak, their brain has trouble finding the words quickly.
Yes. And finally, one more challenge: not enough exposure to English. If you only use English in class but spend the rest of your day in your native language, your brain won't get used to thinking in English. It's like trying to get fit but only exercising once a week.
That's a great comparison. If you want to think in English, you have to train your brain daily. But don't worry. Up next, we'll share some powerful strategies to help you start thinking in English naturally. Let's start with one of the most powerful techniques: immersion. If you want to think in English, you need to surround yourself with it as much as possible.
Right. And no, you don't need to move to an English-speaking country. You can create an English environment wherever you are.
How would someone do that, Sarah?
Great question. Here are some easy ways. Change your phone and social media settings to English. Watch movies, TV shows, and YouTube videos in English. Listen to English podcasts or audiobooks while doing daily tasks.
Yes, the more your brain hears and sees English, the more natural it becomes. It's like training your ears and eyes to think in English. All right, Sarah, be honest. Do you ever talk to yourself?
All the time. And guess what? It's actually a great way to train your brain.
I love this technique. Instead of thinking in your native language, try to describe what you're doing in English. For example, if you're making coffee, say in your head, "Okay, I'm pouring the water. Now I'm adding sugar."
Yes, and you can even ask yourself questions like, what should I wear today? Then answer in English, I think I'll wear a blue shirt because it's sunny.
The best part, no one can hear you, so there's no pressure. It's like a mini English conversation with yourself. Now this one's really interesting. Word association. Instead of translating, connect English words directly to ideas and images.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Instead of translating apple from your language to English, just imagine a red apple. Your brain will start linking the word apple with the actual fruit. So, the translation. Okay, this one's a big one. Stop worrying about mistakes. Fear of making mistakes is one of the biggest barriers to fluency.
Oh, I love that. It's like thinking in pictures instead of words. And this works for actions too. When you hear run, imagine someone running instead of translating it.
Exactly. This trick helps you think faster in English without getting stuck on translation.
Yes. The truth is, no one cares if you make mistakes. Native speakers make mistakes all the time, and they don't stop talking.
That's right. If you focus too much on being perfect, you'll freeze. Instead, just speak. Even if it's not 100% correct, your brain is learning.
And the more you practice, the more natural it becomes. So talk to friends, join language exchange groups, or even just speak to yourself in the mirror.
Last but not least, turn these strategies into daily habits.
Yes, the key to fluency isn't one big study session, it's small, consistent practice every day.
Here's what you can do daily. Think about your plans in English every morning. Write a short journal entry in English. Challenge yourself to describe things around you in English. Before bed, reflect on your day in English.
That's a great list. If you practice even 5 to 10 minutes, every day, your brain will start thinking in English naturally.
All right, let's do a quick recap. Here are the best ways to train your brain to think in English. 1. Immersion, surround yourself with English. 2. Inner monologue, talk to yourself in English. 3. Word association, think in pictures, not translations. 4. Speaking without fear, stop worrying about mistakes. 5. Daily habits, Make English thinking part of your routine.
Yes, pick one or two strategies to start with, and soon you'll notice your brain switching to English automatically.
And now let's put this into practice. Up next, we'll do a fun interactive exercise to help you start thinking in English right now. All right, now that we've shared some awesome strategies, it's time to put them into action. Let's do a fun interactive exercise to help you start thinking in English right now.
Yes, if you're listening to this, don't just sit back. Participate. This is your chance to train your brain in real time.
Let's start with something simple. Look around you. Wherever you are, I want you to describe your surroundings in English. Don't translate, just think in English.
For example, if I'm sitting in a cafe, I might think, I see a wooden table. There's a cup of coffee in front of me. The waiter is talking to a customer.
Now it's your turn. Take a few seconds and describe what you see around you. Ready? Go.
Great job. Even if you only thought of a few words, that's progress. The goal is to practice thinking in English, not to be perfect.
Now let's try another one. Imagine you just woke up this morning. Walk yourself through your morning routine, step by step in English.
For example, I might think, I woke up at 7 a.m. I brushed my teeth. I made a cup of tea and checked my phone. Then I got dressed and left for work.
Now it's your turn. Think about your morning and describe it in English. Take a few seconds and do it now.
Awesome. If you struggled a little, that's totally normal. The more you do this, the easier it gets.
Okay, let's speed things up. I'm going to say a word and I want you to quickly think of another word related to it. Don't translate, just go with your first instinct.
For example, if I say sun, you might think hot or summer. If I say dog, you might think bark or pet. Easy, right?
All right, let's go. I'll say a word and you think of the first word that comes to mind. Book. That was fun. I hope you said something in English. The more you do this, the faster your brain will think in English naturally.
Thinking in English takes time, but if you keep practicing little exercises like these every day, your brain will get used to it.
Yes, even if it feels difficult now, don't stop. The more you train your brain, the more natural English will feel.
Keep challenging yourself. Try describing things around you, narrating your day, or playing word association games whenever you have a free moment.
And up next, we'll share our final tips and encouragement to help you stay motivated on your English journey. So don't go anywhere. Wow, that was a great session. We hope you all tried those exercises because that's how you start training your brain to think in English.
Yes, and before we wrap up, let's share some final tips to help our listeners stay on track.
First, remember, this is a process. Thinking in English won't happen overnight. But if you keep practicing a little bit every day, you will see progress.
Yes, even just 5 to 10 minutes a day can make a huge difference. Don't get discouraged if it feels hard at first. Your brain is learning even when you don't realize it.
The best way to improve? Make English part of your daily routine. Listen to podcasts, watch English videos, talk to yourself, and challenge yourself to think in English as much as possible.
Yes. And if you love music, try listening to English songs and thinking about the lyrics. If you enjoy writing, start a daily English journal. Find what works for you.
And here's a big one. Don't be afraid of mistakes. Making mistakes means you're learning. Instead of worrying, just keep going.
Absolutely. No one speaks perfectly all the time, not even native speakers. The more you practice, the more confident you'll feel.
And finally, celebrate your progress. If you can think even one full sentence in English without translating, that's a win.
Yes. Look back at where you started and see how far you've come. Learning a language is a journey, so enjoy the process.
All right, that brings us to the end of today's episode. We hope you found these tips helpful, and most importantly, we hope you start using them right away.
Yes, and remember, thinking in English is a skill, just like riding a bike. The more you practice, the easier it gets.
If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe and share it with a friend who's also learning English.
And let us know, what's your favorite way to practice thinking in English? Send us a message or comment on our YouTube channel.
Thanks for joining us today, and until next time, keep practicing, keep learning, and keep thinking in English. And that's a wrap on today's episode. We hope these tips help you start thinking in English more naturally.
Yes, and remember, the key is consistency. Just a few minutes of practice each day can make a huge difference.
If you found this episode helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with your friends who are also learning English.
And we'd love to hear from you. Comment below or send us a message. What's your favorite technique for thinking in English?
And if you want more great tips, make sure to check out our other episodes in the English Learning Podcast One playlist.
Thanks for joining us today. Keep practicing, stay confident, and most importantly, keep thinking in English.
See you next time.